not remember the works of the Lord and declare the things that I have seen. Welcome, friends, readers, listeners, and viewers from across America and around the world. I'm your host, Zen Garcia. This is Momentary Zen here on Revolution Radio. And as always, we appreciate all of you taking the time to join us in live broadcasts. It's always a pleasure to share fellowship with you and to discuss all things esoteric. This evening, I have as guests with me Paul on the plane. Paul, are you there, brother?
I am here, Zen. How are you?
I'm doing good, man, and thank you for your willingness to come on with us this evening. It's a short time before we gather together in Dallas. For those that don't know, the International Flat Earth Conference 2019, hosted in Dallas, Texas, will be going down November 14th and 15th, just about 20-some days away. And so I know I'm looking forward to it, and I'm sure you are and so many others are. But if you would, brother, share your website, your contact information, where you do your broadcasts, and where people can go to listen to you live.
Yeah, thanks again for having me. Really appreciate it. It's an honor and a privilege to be here with you tonight. So yeah, really looking forward to Dallas. Cannot wait. I haven't missed any of the conferences in the U.S., so I don't plan to start this year. And yeah, it should be a good time. Good time for all. The best way to see some of my work is on my website, paulontheplane.com. But as far as my live broadcast, I have a show over on Truth Frequency Radio. That is Tuesday nights. My co-host is Roxanne, the Globalist Denier, and our show is called Globli Radio. And then I also produce a weekly podcast, which is over on domelifepodcast.com and available on most major podcast platforms. But the theme of both of those shows and pretty much my entire body of work revolves around the globe deception, as many people probably will get from the titles of those broadcasts.
Right. Well, you know, it is such a huge topic. I mean, completely world-shifting, paradigm-altering, and it's one still that much of the world has not even given consideration to. And it's also with regard to like conspiracy theories or alternative truth. For some reason, it's the hardest one for people to overcome their own indoctrination and what they've been taught and brought up in with regard to the matrix of heliocentric, the Copernican Darwinian model for understanding world. It seems absolute lunacy to even entertain the idea that we could have been lied to about cosmology. And for myself, as probably for you and so many others, I was completely hesitant to even begin an open-minded examination of this topic. And so if you would, can you talk about, you know, just your journey to awakening on this and how it was that you contended with it?
Yeah, sure. You know, you grow up with a couple of basic truths in your life. That is, you know, who your mom and dad are, and 1 + 1 is 2, and the earth is a globe.
Yeah, right.
It's the basics of our, of our lives. Those are things that you can count on, you know, day in, day out as a youngster. So that's, I think, a big reason that it's met with so much opposition. It's almost like going up to somebody and saying, you know, that person you think is your mom isn't. You
right.
know, 1 + 1 isn't 2. You know, I mean, these are basic truths, or so we thought. So, yeah, like a lot of people, when I first heard that there was a growing number of people that were questioning the globe model, you know, the heliocentric model, I did probably what everybody did. I kind of, you know, scoffed at it, laughed, and thought, you know, how can anybody think that in this day and age? You know, right. And the first thing I remember, you know, coming into my mind was we have these pictures from space. So how can anybody, they must not have access to the internet. They must live in a cave,
Yeah, exactly.
We have pictures from space. So that was the first thing that I had to overcome. But I think I was, in a position to receive the information. I wasn't the type of person that said, well, I'm going to go debunk this thing and go from there. I was just really, really curious on how somebody could, or there was this group of people that could even think that. It was more curiosity than anything, and the reason that I began to look into it deeper. And I was ready for that truth to come into my life, I think, just because of the journey that I had been on up to that point. And I had already looked into evolution versus creation, the moon landings, 9/11. Those were a couple of other topics that I was aware of from a conspiracy or, controversial sort of standpoint. So when this truth about the nature of our realm, was kind of landed in my lap, I didn't just dismiss it or insult or whatever. I was just very, very interested in understanding how anybody could come to that understanding and just dived right in.
Mm-hmm. Let's go back just a little bit with regard to, truth and the conspiratorial side of even with the New World Order. Talk a little bit about what it was that even made you open to the topic of cosmology, because certainly you had to have looked into, was 9/11 a catalyst for you? What was it that kind of guided you to open yourself to the idea that, well, we've been lied about these other things, so why not this?
Yeah, it really comes down to but I would say definitively the evolution the theory of evolution, our versus creation. So I grew up in a Christian church and a Bible believing church, and so that was always kind of a conflict in my mind. This creation versus evolution. I went to public school and evolution was hammered into me as the truth. And so I, like many, probably just found ways to justify what the scripture said versus, what I was being taught in school to reconcile that. And I'd have to give a lot of credit to Dr. Ken Hovind and his creation ministries that I was exposed to in my 20s and seeing, the lies in the textbooks and his whole ministry there. I got a hold of his the DVDs. In fact, I had some VHS tapes. If anybody listening remembers what a VHS tape is, I had some VHS tapes, I think. But he came to a local church, and I was already aware of him. I had seen, I can't even remember who gave me a videotape of his, but, I just ate it all up really quickly, just binge watched. I think he had like a 7, 8, 9 DVD set or something like that I purchased when he came into town because I just had my faith restored in the Bible and what I had been taught, that a young earth, creation and things like that. So that point in time I look back on with fondness because that's probably the first time I was able to admit to myself that I had been lied to, that the government or the powers that be, that there was deception. There were things that they were withholding truths about. And so that's probably where my truth journey began when I realized that evolution was, a construct, meant to hide me from my creator and to hide the world from creation and things of that nature. So I questioned the Big Bang and the theory of evolution then from that point forward. But it wasn't until, I got into my 40s. When it came to 9/11, it wasn't a catalyst right away or early on. It was probably not more than 5 years ago that the 9/11 thing really, and I can't remember, I think I watched a documentary online or something like that I was like, could they be lying about that too? And then, kind of dived into that and the moon landings and things like that. So I had been looking into these other deceptions, government psyops, hoaxes, what have you, false flags, when the flat Earth theory, came knocking. So I was ready. I was ripe.
Uh-huh. Well, how long has it been? You said 5 years ago, or how long since the evolution and that whole deception? So how long have you been on this trail?
Well, that was in my 20s, so I'd say, that was...
Oh, wow, a long time then.
Yeah, 2 decades ago is when I would say my late 20s is when I woke up to the lie that the Earth is 5 billion years old, Big Bang theory and all that sort of thing. That was quite a while ago. I've been aware of that, and again, that restored my faith in the scriptures quite a bit when I realized that that what I was being taught was a lie about our creation and about the Creator and how creation occurred. So that has been, the basis for my probably truth seeking journey was knowing that at some level we were being lied to in our textbooks as a youngster. So, but these other things, I don't know what triggered it. I probably was seeing something online. I don't recall specifically. I mean, I watched a moon landing documentary that was questioning the moon landing, and I say, well, that would kind of make sense, and I would justify it probably at that point that maybe it was something that they couldn't do at the time because of technology or what have you, but it had to do it as a show for strength and against the Russians and all of that stuff going on in the 60s and 70s and the arms race, whatever. So I was able to justify those things without going further and watch something on 9/11. I said, that's to advance an agenda to take away our rights. I got that, those things. So that was probably about 5 years ago when I took that next step and realized that those things were also fabrications meant to advance narratives and things of that nature. But it wasn't until late 2016 that my wife came home from somewhere, and I remember she had brought dinner home, and we sat down at the table, and she just kind of out of nowhere said, hey, did you know that there's people out there that think the Earth is flat, and that's where that journey began. And we scoffed and kind of laughed about it, shrugged our shoulders, and went on and with our meal and didn't think about it too heavily, the rest of that day. But I remember it was just a couple of days later, it kept coming back to me, and I was just super curious how anybody could think that. So within a couple of days, I started looking online into that subject, and I was hooked.
Awesome. With regard to your relationship with your wife, is she open to a lot of these things, and is this something that you share in curiosity, and was that something that kind of cemented your relationship together, in marriage and all?
Certain aspects of some of these conspiracies, certain conspiracies, if you want to call them that, she's on board with. The other ones she kind of stays away from. They're just too big for her, I think.
Yeah.
So she kind of picks and chooses. She's a big time anti-vax truther.
Right on.
GMOs, the dangers of, poisons in the food and the water and the air, vaccines. So that's her thing. We have 3 children, and so all of those things are very important in understanding, when it comes to that family. Yeah, so those things she's on board with, but these other things like the moon landing, 9/11, and the shape of the world, that's pretty big for her to comprehend. So she obviously knows where I stand, and she supports the work that I do. She'd rather not be involved too much there. The social aspects of coming out and saying publicly is not something she's too keen on at this point.
Right. Yeah, I think she's actually wise, and for a lot of people, I think that that's where they draw the line in some of these other aspects with regard to some of the conspiracies. I remember when I first woke up, especially to 9/11, and I wanted to, it was important to me to share this kind of truth with even my family, my loved ones, everybody around me. But as far as reception, that was not to be found usually. And even to this day, a lot of people are not wanting to make that trip down that rabbit hole. They're comfortable in their complacency. They want to trust in government, and things like that. And I totally understand that, because there is a stigmatism associated to being a truth seeker, and also in stepping up and being a watchman and sounding the alarm. And that for a lot of people, especially for myself, there's a lot of antagonism and a lot of as far as vehement opposition and also condemnation. And so for a lot of people, they, don't want to contend with or deal with that. And I completely respect and honor people for where they are. I think for myself, I just jumped over that line so far and so fast that there was no turning back, and once I started writing about these things and then just pushing the envelope, there was no way I could ever go back. But even some of those other, if you want to say, maybe lesser, conspiratorial topics, like take for instance the vaccines. Even there is scrutiny and shame that you can feel just in your local community or within, because we have a large family and. Mm-hmm. And a blended family too, and so there's not everybody's on the same page, and so we don't vaccinate, we don't get our flu shots. Yeah, we sought out and praise the Lord, we got a medical exemption for our daughter. So there's lots of things that we were pursuing, but there are friends and family that really frowned upon that and mm-hmm. don't understand it, and hey, keep your kid away from my kid. Right.
Which that's a whole other show in of itself, but
of course,
if they work, then what are you worried about? But those things, even those can bring upon some ridicule and
right.
From social aspects. So nobody's immune when you step out and question the mainstream narrative.
Right. All right, so let's go into the moon landings a bit, because I think this is a perfect stage for moving into the other aspects with regard to biblical cosmology, and we'll talk about all that and your work with it. But what was it in your investigation, kind of what convinced you that all of that was contrived?
Yeah, the documentary I remember watching, brought up things, I think very common things, if anybody that's looked into the moon landings at any depth, like, shadows pointing in different directions.
Right. Different light sources.
Yeah, the no blast crater underneath the lunar module, no dust on the landing pads, things of that nature. So that was the beginning of it that I began to question. I said, yeah, that's strange. I would think that it would be, appear differently. So that's where things began. And then over time, as I looked further into it, and understanding the low pressure environment of space and the radiation and things like that we're told that exists out there, I said, well, I came to the conclusion that spacesuits, wouldn't maybe even work out there. The lunar module, the pressure differential there between the inside and outside, even though they told us they lowered the air pressure down inside the lunar module and the spacesuits down to like 4 or 5 psi. But when you're talking 10 to the negative 11 or 12, negative 12 torr that we're told exists on the surface of the moon, there's such a large pressure differential in the orders of magnitude that, this lunar module that was made out of tinfoil and and the spacesuits made of zippers and snaps, that these things wouldn't stand up to that environment and the changes in temperature and the problems with the batteries. The dune buggy up there was
right.
The thing started to build up in my mind, and I was like, the more you dig, the more you realize all of these problems. So that's kind of where I left it. And so I was I'd say I was probably 90-10 as far as 90% it was fake, 10% real. I was pretty much right there on the edge when, the heliocentric lie, I was exposed to that, because that, then it was, well, it's obvious then, the moon doesn't exist as we're told it does. And so therefore, sending 2 men there on a 500,000 mile round trip to land on a rock that's traveling, at these speeds and all these different directions, that's just an impossibility. So from then on out, the moon landings were almost it was almost a second thought then. That was totally, I was such a distance past, even questioning the moon landings now. There was no way that even happened in my mind. I was way past that. But it's a good litmus test now when you're talking to somebody else, because
right.
I think if you're talking to somebody and you're wondering if you should bring up, anything about the shape of the earth and, that you're questioning the heliocentric model or the globe model and things of that nature, it's really good, I think, idea to get an understanding where they stand on the moon landings, because if they admit that they think the government lied about that, well, then you've got somebody. But, in this day and age, if somebody, I think, still believes that we sent 6 men to the moon and back, 6 missions to the moon and back in the 60s and 70s, then probably not ready for some of these bigger lies that
right.
Been made aware of.
Right. And with regard to the moon landing, it was such a huge hoax. Massive hoax. The whole world still believes that, it was the greatest accomplishment of humanity ever, doing and making these round trip journeys to the moon and landing all these individuals upon it, and how they are still just idolized as heroes. This special group of individuals, those that walked on the moon, and how they are just hailed as almost like gods, then especially in the scientific community, they got to look at the earth and the moon, that kind of thing. And then when you realize the impossible nature, and especially back in the 60s when this is all have been believed to have been achieved, that they can't even now, admittedly, they can't get out past the Van Allen radiation belts, and that to do so you'd have to coat the lunar module in lead, and that it would be so heavy it would never even get off the ground. Yeah. These kind of things are and then you look at stories of how the lunar rocks that they had given out, and how they were tested and came back to be petrified wood. And just things like that, just absolute, it's ludicrous, really. It's laughable that we ever believed any of these things. And yet this is still, as far as scientism being a religion, because that's exactly what it is. Right. Still, people are still bowing at that altar,
Yeah, exactly. That's how I look at it. That's how I see it in my mind, and I would equate it to exactly that, a very dogmatic, religious sort of, connection that people have to space and the heliocentric model, the globe, the moon landings, everything that goes along with it. So it's just like, again, kind of coming up and saying that, your mom isn't who you think it is. People take deep offense to it. It'd be like going up to a Christian and say, well, Jesus is fake. It's a very religious, sort of outlook that people have on those things. And so when you question it, they look at you just like, are you nuts? And they don't understand why you don't see what they see. And, it's very much like you said, bowing to the altar of scientism. So I think that's exactly what's going on here. And that's why we see the reactions that we do when these narratives are being questioned.
Right. Yeah. Cause, the Jesuits and, NASA and the astrophysicists, they are the neoteric priests of Baal, without a doubt. And they are holding on to the whole, Luciferian deception, the sun as the center of the solar system, that, we're spinning 66,600 miles an hour around the sun as it moves at astronomical speeds around the center of the Milky Way, and then the Milky Way also moving at 1,000,000 miles an hour around some galactic center, and yet the stars are the same every night and have been for thousands of years. The North Star has been used to navigate and to find the direction as far as north for thousands of years, and yet these kind of things are never considered and never second guessed, never looked at or examined with any kind of challenge. And so let's talk about what it was that, looking into it, examining it. What were the first kind of things that led you to accept and now know that the truth of biblical cosmology?
Well, I had fortunate to have the upbringing in the church and faith in the scriptures and things of that nature. So when this truth that I had been blinded, via my programming and indoctrination and school and media and TV and Hollywood and all of the things that were reinforcing it after, I was told that the earth is a spinning ball flying through space at all these different speeds, different directions simultaneously. When I got a hold of this truth, obviously there was the knee-jerk reaction. I questioned, pictures from space and a couple other things like that were just, your immediate thoughts. Where's the edge? Ships over the horizon. The basic stuff that I think we're programmed with to just think it's ludicrous that anybody would think, that the earth is not a ball. So once I overcame those, which takes, a matter of hours with anybody that's willing to put their ego aside and admit that maybe they've been lied to and just looks at some of the evidence objectively. But I took to biblical cosmology like a fish to water because I had been grounded in the scriptures. So I was already a young earth creationist and that sort of thing. And so, understanding that there was 100, 200 verses in the Bible, what have you, that support a geocentric earth, a flat stationary plane, with a firmament and that sort of thing. So, there's all this evidence, a preponderance of evidence that the earth is, that there is no curvature, there is no motion of the earth, it's not moving in any way, shape, or form. All of that stuff is there, and that's what you first come across. And then I remember seeing something more on a biblical side of the flat earth, conversation, and then showing and seeing the support in the scriptures for the same sort of idea or model. And so that was, that pushed me over the edge, so to speak, for sure.
Right.
That sealed the deal, and then you're kind of like slapping yourself in the head going, how come I didn't see this?
Right.
That's the reaction that I had after, a couple of days, a couple of weeks of just binge watching information and thinking and praying and just, considering all of this, sort of information that you're getting. And, it just clicks. It makes sense. At least that was my path.
Yeah. For me also, as far as opening myself to it, it was immediately I recognized that there was no curvature. And, once you realize and understand that we can see lighthouses, islands, cityscapes, monuments, Statue of Liberty, at distances which far exceed what we should be able to according to the mathematical formula for determining curvature. And then anybody that goes and looks at, the work of Samuel Burley Robotham, the Bedford Level experiment, or so many people have done their own laser tests, their own experiments, which confirms that, there is no curvature. And then the other thing with regard to the dynamics and the nature of water, that it cannot adhere to a ball, but must gather in pool, and in doing so, it will level, at sea level and will be flat across the horizon. I mean, those kind of things were immediately apparent in doing research. I mean, it didn't even take me a day to come to these conclusions.
Or just doesn't it? When you come across that, you're like, of course.
Yeah.
Why didn't I think of that? Why didn't I see this? Of course.
Right.
I know that was my reaction as well. Of course. Right.
Yeah, exactly. And then the other thing was, that there's no motion to the earth, especially in the as much as they say there is. 1,037 miles an hour, faster than the speed of sound, faster than a bullet shot from a gun, that we're supposed to be moving at these excessive rates of speed, and yet you can go outside and on a day when there's no wind, my flag won't even be waving in motion, and I mean, just absolute ludicrous. And so those three things, without a doubt, completely transformed my whole paradigm for understanding the world. And then after that, it was just a matter of, because myself, I wanted to re-examine everything in the scriptures with regard to stories like even, Joshua's long day and those kind of things. And so can you talk about your journey with regard to that and re-examination of the word?
Yeah. I don't recall exactly, where the information came from, but I think it was probably a YouTube video that went through some of the verses, or a website that I navigated to via description in a YouTube video and read through the verses, and these, that story that you bring up, Joshua, commanding the sun to stop and,
right.
and things of that nature, and seeing all the support of a geocentric, stationary, flat earth, with a firmament. The support in the scripture is remarkable. I mean, it is,
right.
And it's not just one or two verses, which is kind of what those that maintain that the scriptures are true, but that the earth is a ball, they basically have verse, Isaiah 40, 40:22.
Yeah.
That says he sits upon the circle of the earth. So, just the amount of evidence in the Bible that supports that was, I was really convicted in my spirit, because it was like, how did I not see this? Some of these stories I had read before. I mean, how many times had I read the Genesis account,
right.
the account of creation, and I had never even dawned on me how the earth was created on, essentially 4 days before the sun.
Right.
Things of that nature. And so, it's interesting, that particular, component of all this. I remember, I have two teenagers, and they kind of went through this with me. I was very public about it. Some people maybe choose not to involve their children, but both my children, or my two teenagers, they go to a private Christian school, and so they're grounded in the scriptures and raised in the church and things like that. So, I knew that would be the best way to start this conversation with them, because I know they're Bible believing Christians. And so I sat them down one day and I said, let's go through the creation account here, shall we? And, I went through, day 1, day 2, day 3, and then day 4, we got to the sun and the moon put in the firmament.
Right.
And I remember my daughter looking at me, and the light bulb goes on, and she looks at me and she goes, "Oh my gosh, Dad, my whole life is a lie." That's how she responded. You could just see the light bulb go on.
Uh-huh.
They're both definitely flat earthers today.
Awesome.
It was the scriptures really that brings it home, I think, for somebody that is grounded in the scriptures, that believe it is the infallible, inerrant word of God, inspired,
yes.
God breathed, etc.
Right.
So if you have somebody like that you're talking to, and that where their convictions are, that you can bring up all of these verses and all this evidence in the scriptures that point to that, that's something that they should, I would expect, at least I would anticipate that they would take to it like a fish to water, because that's what I did.
Right.
It takes a lot to get through all of those years, and for me, basically 4 decades of programming and indoctrination, to get through on the science or secular side of it, the pictures from space, the moon landings, what have you, satellites,
Right.
Satellite TV, all the different things that kind of come up that you start questioning. Well, how does it work? How does it work now? Because you're told it's this, and you're assuming it's this, and then you dive into all the information and you go, oh, okay. In fact, most of those things make sense on a stationary, flat plane versus versus curvature and motion, like you were talking about. But the first thing for me was the pictures from space. That's the first thing that came to my mind, and that's the first thing I wanted to overcome or look into. And I went into, did my Google search, Earth from space, and started learning about the blue marble being just a Photoshop thing, and looking all the different pictures of the Earth from different satellites, and over the years, different space agencies. They were all different colored, size, shape of the continents,
Right.
sort of thing. And I had been flying over this flat plane for a long time, a lot of flying for business purposes, for personal, travel and things like that. And, it's very rare that you, at least in my experience, when you're flying, over like over North America, over the United States, for you to have a clear day where you can, where you fly across it for, 2 or 3 hours and you don't have any clouds and you can just see the ground. That's quite an anomaly. I can't remember that happening. I mean, you have breaks in the clouds, but it's, typically you've got layers and layers of clouds that you are flying over, most of the time. But you look at all these pictures, and you can see North America. It seems like whenever they take a picture from space, it's just a gorgeous day. Half the continent is in the bright sunshine, and we wouldn't be able to see colors like that. I mean, some of these images we're told are taken from 22,000 up to 1 million miles away. And the Earth wouldn't, it just wouldn't look like that, just based on personal observation.
Yeah, and then, again, with regard to the images, you immediately notice, as you mentioned, the different shapes and sizes of the continents, the different colors of the water, largely missing, as far as clouds and storm systems and all that. And then when you actually see that some of the clouds have been cloned and it looks photoshopped, all of these things, without question, just force you to throw all of that information from NASA out the window. And for myself, is if you catch them in a lie once, you can never trust or believe anything that they say ever again. And one of the biggest pieces for me with regard to NASA and the whole examination of the images from space is the Apollo 11, the released video that Bart Cybrell got from the what's the name of it? A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Moon.
Yes.
And the way that they were, well, first they were lying about where they were. They said that they were all the way on the moon and that they were taking images of the Earth in the shape of, a globe. And yet then we see through this Freedom of Information Act released video how they are trying to hoax the public, and they're using the window of the lunar module to portray the Earth as being round in shape. I mean, if it were round, why would you need to hoax it, And if you're going to hoax it, well, then what are you trying to cover up? And what's the real story? And so, once anybody sees that, if you believe anything that NASA does or says, just shame on you,
Yeah, how many times, like you said, how many times are you going to catch them in a lie before you say,
enough is enough.
These guys can't be trusted? Yeah.
Right.
And that's the motivation. Obviously behind it, at least in my opinion, was to hide the creation from the creator, or vice versa. Hide the creator from us,
Right.
and not realizing who we are and how special we are, et cetera. I remember, a couple of weeks into my initial investigation into the shape of the Earth and, what we were being told versus personal observation and evidence that other people had brought forth, other tests that had been done and published online, and et cetera, et cetera. It was probably a couple of weeks later. We're over at my mom's place for dinner, and my wife, brings up kind of ribbing me, and she's like, "Yo, guess what Paul's into? Guess what Paul's into now? Because she's the first one I talked to about it, obviously, a couple of days later, but." And, so what's going on, and so I went into it, probably spent, 15, 20 minutes, just kind of, just vomiting all the stuff up that
right.
looking at for the last couple of weeks, and flights, in the southern hemisphere, and water, 7% of the Earth being water, and the surface of water always being flat and level, and motion, and like you said, speed of sound at the equator, and wobbling and spinning and orbiting, chasing the sun as a vortex, through space, all of these different things. And my mom and stepdad were just, their jaws were on the table. They were just like, and my stepdad was like, so obviously he was making a compelling argument because he didn't say anything other than ask me the why question, Well,
yeah, you're right.
That's a big one. About the shape of the Earth, valid question. Once you just got dumped on like that, with all new information that's going to challenge your, and my stepdad's in his 70s. So, he's had almost twice as much of time of indoctrination and programming than I had. And I said, well, I think they're hiding God. I think they're hiding God. That was the bottom line for me. And that was the motivation. Now there's obviously other reasons, mind control and all of those things, but I think that's what it all ends up being is, these dark forces, these satanic powers that are evident, down here on Earth. That is the motivation, is to keep us separated and keep us from realizing our full potential and obviously the salvation issue that comes with that.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you, and I think that even the next stage of it, because I do believe that the next aspect of this whole strong delusion and the whole Copernican, Darwinian, heliocentric model for understanding world is that they are now pushing, especially with the Ancient Aliens series, that the extraterrestrials created us. And that seems to be the next aspect of the agenda. And I do fully anticipate that the Antichrist is going to be in some way connected to this ideology that the extraterrestrials, the ancient aliens, who we know to be the fallen angels, that they're going to somehow return and take credit for what should be given over to God, and that they are going to have this replacement theology, or at least that's the conclusions that I've come to in my studies and research on this. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think the biggest thing for me, and I'm not sure if I'm answering the question directly, so you get me back on track. But
yeah, sure.
To me, it's I'm with Rob Skiba on this. I mean, in fact, he was on my show last night over on TFR. He had kind of talked a little bit about this, but yeah, I mean, in one breath, there's a group of people, the scientism leaders, high priests, whatever you want to call them, if you look at it like a religion. Yeah. They're saying, there's no way that we are intelligently designed, the Big Bang Theory.
Yeah, right.
But then in the other breath, it's, well, okay, there is evidence of intelligent design, but it's not an almighty God, that loving creator and that sort of thing who sent, who died on the cross for us. No, it's got to be these ancient aliens now, right?
Right.
So, it's like, not intelligent design, but okay, well, maybe it is, but it's not the God of the Bible.
Right.
So I find that extremely hypocritical, very ironic, and just more evidence that, trying to keep the narrative away from the, one true living God.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And that we needed to be redeemed. That the whole fall of humanity, that God would send his son into flesh in order to redeem us and to restore us to our original bright nature and to our first estate. All of those things, are not even considered because, again, they want to deny Christianity and the God of the Bible, and they want to divert. If it's not just evolution and random, well, it was the extraterrestrials that jumped the gun on evolution. And you hear this being preached and taught by so many people, and so many people that are well respected in the alternative truth community. Like all of the guys on the Ancient Alien series, you hear people like Jordan Maxwell and David Icke and all of these people that have really helped people to bridge the gap on, what are fringe aspects of truth, but yet they completely deny Christianity, and they have bowed down to and accepted, the mark of the beast, and they are towing that whole line that the extraterrestrials are our creators, and that they're our saviors. They're coming back to save us from ourselves. And so, in my opinion, it's that whole thing of, the New World Order, establishing the beast system, establishing world government through the United Nations, bringing America to its knees, the whole $23 trillion in debt. If there's a global reset, there's a reestablishment of currency and wealth and the monetization system. Well, then you have some extraterrestrials step in and say, oh, well, we've got all the answers for fixing all the problems, just as they depicted it. I don't know if you've seen that whole series called Childhood's End. It was on the Sci-Fi Channel, but anyways, there was this group of what are called the Overwatch, the Overwatchers, and they're basically this extraterrestrial force come from space. They cure illness and resolve war and bring forth prosperity and heal the sick, all the things that Christ did when he was in the flesh. But they cure all these ails, and then as Overwatch, they rule from behind the scenes. And then after humanity really becomes comfortable with them, they step out of the darkness, and lo and behold, they look exactly like devil, the devil, Satan. And Satan walks down the stage with holding the hands of a young boy and little girl, and he's just all benevolent and, comes as an angel of light. And so I think they are, through Hollywood, they are depicting and hinting at what truly the New World Order, the conspiracy, because I take it all back to even what Lucifer said in Isaiah 14, where he said he wanted to exalt his throne above the stars and the clouds of God, in the sides of the north, above the mount of the congregation, that he wanted to be like the Most High, and that his whole purpose and the 1/3 of the angels that joined him so long ago and being cast out of the heaven, that they are trying to divert worship, to steal worship and devotion of humanity for the real Creator and for Christ and the Holy Spirit and Yeshua coming into the flesh and redeeming us, that they are trying to steal all of that. And even since the ancient times, the antediluvian age, we see the worship of the feathered serpent. And so these kind of things, Revelation, it says that old dragon, that ancient serpent who deceiveth the whole world. And so this is, my take on what seems again to be the end game and the next cycle of this whole Darwinian, Copernican, heliocentric model for understanding world.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I have not seen that show or series, but as you described it, that just you describing it, kind of gives me a shiver. The strong delusion and just flat out fooling people into thinking that an angel of light, somebody that's good and benevolent, and essentially trying to take the place of God in our lives, and
right.
And bringing that delusion, wanting to, just seek out and just destroy everything good that God has done is a scary thing. So
yeah.
When you look back and gain an understanding about, the alternative, or the mainstream narrative about, how we evolved to be where we are today and all of that. That was obviously very cleverly designed and
right.
In my opinion, beyond just humanity's ability to do that, it required much more than that. It required something very dark and in the spiritual realm to be able to pull that off at the level that it has happened. So that would just makes a lot of sense to me. And then meant to serve a purpose, and it continued to advance a narrative. And when the end game, when we're there, that's obviously up for speculation. But I think it's pretty well defined on what that is going to look like, at least at some level, with an alien visit and our creators, and maybe coming to save us, and really just taking the place of the finished work that Jesus gave us. And it's scary to think about how many people are going to be fooled by that, and it's
right.
saddening.
Yeah, really, really is, because again, in Scripture it says, because they love not the truth, that even the most elect could be deceived if it were possible. And then a lot of people say, biblical cosmology, flat Earth has nothing to do with salvation, and yet if you examine scientism as a faith and as a religion, it's done greater damage to humanity, and especially to the youth, and has separated more people from belief in God and understanding the Bible as the inerrant, inspired word of the Creator, and that truly we were made in His image, and that the earth was made special for us. It's completely replaced that with belief that we evolved of monkeys and that life just randomly came into being, and if that's not separating people from salvation through Christ and their eternity secured through Him, I don't know what else has done more damage than that. And so certainly to me, this is a salvational issue, and reason why it's important in my life, and why I've dedicated the last few years since 2015, when I first woke up to this, and writing books and doing broadcasts on it. And so I know that this has also been important to you, and that's been a focus of your work as well. But we're 1 minute out from break, and so just a real quick comment, and then we'll pick it up on the other side.
Yeah, sounds great. I'll probably wrap up this segment just by saying, that's one thing I think those that are grounded in the Scriptures can really take a look at and see where we've been in this narrative and where it's going. And it, lines up with Scriptures, pretty closely. There isn't a lot of deviation that you could really argue, other than, this is, what Bible prophesies. And where are you going to be when the time comes? Where are you going to be with the Lord?
Right. Absolutely. All right, we'll be right back, everybody, for second hour. All right, welcome back, everybody, for second hour. I'm your host, Zen Garcia. This is Momentary Zen here on Revolution Radio, and I'm honored to have as guest with me Paul on the Plane, who has his own show on Truth Frequency Radio. Paul, if you would, can you share your information once more, and then we'll go into the rest of the show.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks, Zen. Just an honor and privilege to be here again. Really enjoying the conversation tonight, so thanks for having me on the show. Over on Truth Frequency Radio. Zen, I know you're very familiar with that station.
Yes.
The show that I have there is my co-host and I, Roxanne, the Globalist Denier, who I believe is listening to this show tonight. Hello, Roxanne. Big shout out to you. We have a program called Global Live Radio, and that is live every Tuesday night on TFR, 8 p.m. Eastern here in the U.S., 1 a.m. London time. So again, big shout out to Roxanne, who stays up extremely late for the show once a week in the middle of the night for her. And then my podcast that's released weekly over at domelifepodcast.com. is called Dome Life, and my co-host there is Mitchell from Australia, and we release a podcast every single week, and people can listen to that on most major podcast platforms. So if you're looking for something to listen to on a weekly basis, check us out, domelifepodcast.com, or you can find us on iTunes and Stitcher, Spotify, Google Play, SoundCloud, etc.
Excellent. You said the website is paulandtheplane.com, correct?
That's where my entire body of work exists. Yes.
All right. Great. Well, we were talking about the Great Deception before we went to break, but I want to kind of move us into the reasons why you decided to begin doing your broadcast and kind of the body of work that you've brought forth over the past few years. And so if you would, can you talk about that? When was the decision for you to, or were you already doing shows previous to waking up to this particular revelation?
No, I wasn't. This live radio and podcasting and all that sort of thing has come about since. Looking back, just historically, I've always just been someone that cared about the truth. Probably started like we talked about in the first segment, waking up to the lie of evolution and our creation and things like that. So, from that point forward, I was willing to admit that I had been lied to at some level, and did not just take things at pure face value. Was questioning things, and from there on out, it was the poisons in the food and the poisons in the air and the poisons in our water, and they want to inject us with poisons, and when we're young, they want to do it when we're adults as well, and all of those things. So I was always been the kind of person that would speak out about those things. So I never really shied away from, I guess, sticking my neck out there, knowing it wasn't the popular thing, but there's a little bit more socially acceptable if you eat organic food and filter your water and things like that. That's not as bad as coming in and saying, well, I don't think we live on a globe. That's obviously a little bit different level, but it's just how the way I've always run my life is just I'm willing to say what I think and speak out, and if I think something is true, I'm not going to sit in the back room or sit in the closet. I'm gonna voice my opinion and tell you why, and try and get more people to realize it. I care about the truth, and when it comes to this specific conversation, I remember thinking when I first was exposed to the globe lie and starting to do my own investigation and thinking and praying and just considering all of this new information. Once I got to that point and I realized that that the globe was a lie, then from that point forward, I remember thinking I got to be able to tell my kids that I didn't stay silent. That's something that's important to me, and to be a good role model as best I can. And obviously I have my shortcomings, but when it comes to these, what I would say pillars of truth in our life, and that is, God, family, the shape of the world now, and all of these deceptions that we find ourselves in, I want to be able to tell my kids down the road that, and I want them to be able to look back and say, yeah, Dad, when he discovered the truth, he didn't shy away from it. That's important to me. Right.
And then, for yourself and myself, having, being students of the Word, Ezekiel 33, the watchman's parable, and that the blood is upon us if we don't sound the trumpet. But that if we do, then, the blood, and they don't heed or listen, then that blood be upon them, those that, are seeking and studying themselves. But so I take that parable to heart, and I know you do as well, and a lot of those that are sounding and standing up for truth and doing the work that we've all decided to do now. Pastor Nate and Robbie also celebrate truth. They have their show on Saturdays, 10 p.m. to midnight, and they take that serious as well. Rob Skiba and others, and so we're all doing that kind of and being service to the kingdom, and as Christ's example to all of us, that we're trying to be foot washers to humanity and to bring people to truth, because truly in the scriptures it says my people are killed for lack of knowledge. And so not knowing about a lot of the things, especially with vaccines and, people's children being in danger of heavy metal toxicity and those kind of things. It's very important, especially with the New World Order on the horizon and the beast kingdom and the coming reign of the Antichrist. And again, what we were talking about is an extension of the whole ancient aliens and the whole provision that they're trying to pull off, and that there is no real God, but that the real gods are these extraterrestrial beings that are supposedly coming to save us from ourselves. And so many people now ready and willing and looking to buy into that deception, which is sad, but again, it comes because there's no love of the truth, and so many people have no regard, no concern for the kingdom or things of a spiritual nature. And because of that and that complacency, as far as the Laodicean church, so many being just comfortable in the luxury and the complacency that we're blessed, especially here in this country, to still enjoy, even though we're $23 trillion in debt and something has to give at some point. But still, it's, peace comes sudden destruction, in my opinion.
Yeah, when it comes to the topic of the New World Order and, where the end game is, and, Bible prophecy and things like that, there's a few people, I mentioned Rob Skiba earlier, that I think really have done a good job and kind of highlighting some historical events and current events that would line that up and, kind of restored faith in the Bible for a lot of people. My mother, in fact, she accompanied me over to the Take on the World conference in Ohio just this last August. Really her first experience and hanging around with some like-minded people, and got a chance to listen to Rob, 3 nights in a row, and just left there with her jaw on the floor, and just how everything is lining up, with the scriptures, and Rob does a really good job of piecing it together. And and people like yourself, I mean, your body of work is immense. It's so awesome, all the books and the way you break stuff down. So there's so much good material out there, and it comes down to exactly what you said, and that is people that love the truth. If you love the truth, you're going to find this stuff. You're going to find this content. You're going to search it out for yourselves. You're going to, be in prayer. You're going to, you're going to let the Spirit lead you into these truths. You're going to be open to that. You're going to be a vessel for the Lord. All of these things, if you're willing,
right.
My Lord, send me. That sort of thing, really what we find. And I think, there's so many great people out there that, this flat Earth movement, the global eye community, whatever you want to call us, is growing exponentially, because I think there is a lot more people than I thought. I'm really tickled that we've come this far, and I'm kind of flat Earth class of 2017. I still consider myself relatively new compared to some of the people that I hang around with, but there are millions and millions and millions. I'm estimating upward of 50 to 100 million people now that will admit the globe is a lie, maybe even more. These are people that love the truth. They care about the truth, and whether they're, standing on the scriptures or not, but maybe that's part of their awakening, part of their path, part of their journey down the road. But at the end of the day, they care and love about the truth, and a willing heart. That's what the Lord is looking for. So big shout out. You mentioned Pastor Nate Wolf. I see him in the chat. So shout out to Pastor Nate.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And individuals like, Pastor Nate and, his story and his example. I mean, there's a lot of people that are now standing up for this truth and willing to challenge the whole thing of, the accepted, mode of belief and the whole scientism, and individuals like Robbie that have the skill set, doing movies and and you know, a lot of people writing books now, and so it's a huge blessing. And to be part of the movement, really feel like we're all like a family, extended brothers and sisters. Especially in the body of Christ, those of us that are believers. It's a beautiful thing to watch the evolution and the growth and how so many people, especially with the youth, because I think that the youth are so just dissatisfied with the status quo and with the whole the American dream and the whole story of, just get a good education, get a good job so you can make a lot of money and get a house and fill it with a bunch of stuff and, no meaning, no purpose other than to be wealthy. It's not jiving with them anymore. They're really seeing that something's not right with what's going on in the world, and that that dream seems to be empty when you really consider the larger aspects of who we are, why we're here, and what all this is really all about. There's, no more just going to buy into that or accept that, and it is what it is because it is, and they're not accepting those kind of answers anymore. They really want to know truth for themselves, and so I see a yearning amongst the youth, and my children are really part of that as well. They have a ministry called Indoctrination, which is focused on that kind of thing. But I see, and your children as well, are a catalyst for this awakening. And there are so many now among the youth that know different and better. And they're outspoken about it. They are willing to put themselves on the line, social media, share it. And they have an understanding of, the tool set of how to share and reach people in a way that is still really new to us as far as having those platforms that we're using, even, Revolution Radio here and Truth Frequency Radio, which I'm on every Thursday night. Those kind of things, the youth almost have a second nature, an ability and a capacity to use those kind of things. Whereas it took us, well, at least myself, it took me a long time to kind of figure this stuff out, but they are able to do it like it's nothing, like getting up and it's part of breakfast or something.
Yeah, the amount of skills and experience, that people have in the community from their, work life or, other experiences, what have you, all coming together, and it's inspiring, and I don't know if you've heard, but there was recently a poll done by a statistics firm in the country of Brazil, South America, that they did some polling and demographics and questions, and like we would see polls around election time, what have you, with an error, margin of error, whatever. But the estimates is that the number of people in Brazil that believe that the globe is a lie, that the heliocentric model is bunk, is around 11 million already, and there's these pockets of truth-seeking communities. Obviously, it's big in Europe, in the States, and we're finding it in Spain and the UK and in South America as well too. These large pockets of I keep thinking of them as large pockets of resistance. These are the truth warriors that are out there that are willing to question the mainstream narrative and not afraid to stick their neck out there. So and I believe there's a silent majority in the world that, like you mentioned, and the youth are a big part of that. That feels such a disenfranchisement, when it comes to the quote unquote the American dream or what have you, and realizing that everything that they were promised, what they were told, what they see on TV and movies, and then they get back to reality and they grow up in this country and or wherever they are in the world, and it just is not what they had always hoped and dreamed of. And so questioning things is the key, and that's the beginning, is some skepticism and not just taking things at pure face value, and understanding that everything that you learned, quote unquote learned, what you were told in school, it's not a given. It's not a given. It's a lie propped up by propaganda, as my host over on TFR so eloquently says every week, backed up by propaganda. So I see Roxanne has made it into the chat. So how are you, Roxanne? Good to see you tonight.
Yeah, I love your name, Roxanne Globetrotter. That's awesome. I want to give a real quick shout out to Robinson Tovai. He lives in Brazil, and he's made available to that huge population of people. He's translated the 3 books that I've done on the flat earth and the firmament. Flat earth as key to decrypt the book of Enoch, the firmament vaulted dome of the earth, and paradise sides in the north and the mouth of the congregation. And so, I appreciate him. And there's another individual, Sergio, that is now translating the firmament into Spanish. And so I really appreciate these individuals, and I do hope that it is a catalyst for helping people to bridge that gap in this understanding. And this is a worldwide movement. Once people look at and examine that the non-existent nature of curvature, doesn't matter what you think about the shape of the earth, what we've been told as far as the heliocentric system is an impossibility. If there's no curvature, the earth cannot be round or spherical in shape. And if it's not spherical in shape, a lot has to be reconsidered with regard to the dynamics of cosmology, the way things work. And certainly the Bible and the book of Enoch, especially the book on the courses of the heavenly luminaries, tells us that it is the sun, the moon, Saturn, Jupiter, Venus, Mercury, and Mars that move and circle around Polaris as the fixed star of the celestial night, not the sun. And certainly we see evidence of this with the star trails and the time-lapse photography. It shows this exact thing, that all the luminaries, as the book of Enoch says, in 14 chapters, not one verse, on the movement of the earth. And we know the Bible says that the earth is fixed, stationary, and motionless. And so this is biblical cosmology 101, and when you come to the truth of this narrative, it forces us to reconsider everything. As we talked about previously, the Genesis timeline, which Rob and I have been doing shows where we're going over that Genesis timeline in a very thorough manner. I'm actually going to be on with him again tonight, midnight to 2 a.m., which is late for me. So I feel you, Roxy, and what you go through. Welcome, Link. But it's well worth it to me to do those shows and for us to journey into this together, because again, the earth and the heavens made together and pre-existing before the sun and the luminaries placed into the tabernacle of the firmament on the 4th day. And so the whole model of planetary accretion described by NASA, that, the spinning of the universe and the Milky Way galaxies and the suns coming together as stars, and then it's their spin that causes the planets to come in together and orbit around them. You can throw all that out the window, because the earth was here way before the sun was. And, the earth couldn't have been just spinning around nothing out there in the middle of space. I mean, does not make any sense. And then examining Isaiah 40:22, you get the whole thing of the earth being the foundation, the floor, and the heavens, the curtains spread above it, as being in the shape of a tent or a tabernacle, which is exactly what we've shown in the biblical cosmology, with the firmament being arched and encapsulating the circle of the earth. Paul?
Well, how do I follow that? I agree. That's one of the, you talk about curvature. That's something, if anybody's listening, you just assume that it exists. You assume that snipers adjust
Right.
for it. You assume that, the military does with long range missiles and all these things. But when you start looking into, what really exists as far as, being able to scientifically measure it, it just doesn't exist. And we do most of our observations over water because we know the natural properties of water. Fluid dynamics is that it always lays level, lays flat. The surface is always going to be flat. So, and you said at the top of the show, we were able to see too far. We have technology in our hands today, like the Nikon P900 or Nikon P1000, that allows us to, increase our angular resolution. The optics allow us to see these, detail of these great instances. We're able to pick out buildings and lighthouses and mountains and things like that based on the globe math, based on the math that we're given by mainstream science.
Right.
These objects, we should not be able to see them. And all that. So that was the kind of the first thing that I did after, being willing to admit that the globe was a lie, that the possibility that the globe was a lie, after I settled on the fact that the pictures that we had all been given of the Earth from space were nothing but CGI composites, that they weren't really photographs, but they were pieced together and photoshopped and, software rendering, which is what my Faking Space series really exposes in great detail. The images that we have received, especially since 2009, 2010 going forward, all of these different images of the Earth that we get from the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter, from the Discovery satellite with its camera, the Himawari, all of these things, and I break down and showing, that anybody with some free software tools can prove to themselves that these things aren't real photographs. But once I got that through my head, I had to go out and see this lack of curvature for myself. So for me, it was in Lake Tahoe. It was in late February, early March of 2017. I was down there on business, and I had kind of some free time, and so down in Reno, Nevada. And so I went up to Lake Tahoe, and I did a little research ahead of time, knowing that there were two casinos that stood about 200 feet tall on the south side of the lake, which is about 22 miles in length. And I had seen pictures, quote unquote pictures of Lake Tahoe from space with this big curvature to it, these satellite photos of Lake Tahoe. So I said, if I plunk myself on the north shore of Lake Tahoe and sit down with my camera just above the water on the north end, I should not be able to, based on globe math, I should not be able to see those casinos. So I went up there and did that. I plopped myself down, had a nice clear day, and put my camera, basically my tripod was right in the water. And I sat down, it was less than 2 feet off the ground, and I shot across the lake there, and bam, there were the two casinos.
Nice.
And I had to do it for myself. I had to do it for myself.
Yeah,
That's
absolutely.
kind of how the channel started, because then I put all that footage that I got into a video and showed all my work and the ambient conditions and the math, and I did all this, and I said I shouldn't be able to see these if we live on a globe, and that's kind of how I started my YouTube channel.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And how long's it been now? When was your first show?
Let's see here. Well, the YouTube channel I started early in 2017. Now, I had a YouTube channel for a long time, but I changed the name of it. I've had a YouTube channel for a while, but I kind of changed the name of it to Paul on the Plane, and then started uploading videos and things like that. But as far as my Truth Frequency radio show, that I was offered, I believe, in March or April of 2018. So it's been a little bit more than a year now. Just had our 1 year anniversary. April of 2019.
That's awesome, man. Congratulations.
Thanks.
I know you've been doing incredible work since that time. And so, can you talk about, some of the topics and the shows that you've done, the guests that you've invited? We're really kind of a small group, and it's a beautiful thing that others are willing, and just really quickly, we were talking about the military personnel that have come out and that really have been outspoken and willing to even put their reputations and their names on the line. Mark Sargent, Strange World on Truth Frequency Radio, he does an incredible job at bringing forth all these different guests and all these different hosts and sharing their stories, and what what a wealth of information that has added to, what's available with regard to testimonies and individuals that have confirmed, the confirming witness out of the mouths of through three witnesses shall the truth be established.
Yeah, right on. Mark's been a mainstay on TFR for quite a while. His show, I think he's in the 200th episode, in the 200s as far as episodes. It's remarkable. And his subject matter experts, his, major kudos to him. He put himself out there early with his Flat Earth Clues in 2015 or something like that. And I don't remember the exact dates that he kind of stepped out and put himself out there and said, all right, internet hive mind, debunk me, but here's what I see. And, still to this day, they're looked at as some of the pillars of the community, some of those videos and believe so. But, he put his email address and phone number out there. And so guess what? Calling him, and so, to see the subject matter experts that he's been able to compile, all these, ex-military personnel and, with these professional experiences that, coming in with their training and their expertise and what have you, being able to corroborate, the fact that, the lack of curvature, the lack of motion, none of these things are taking into account, the vacuum experts, the airline pilots, all of these things. Right. That he's able to bring to the table, via his show. It's just been a wonderful platform. So, I basically what me and my, co-host and guests have done has just been, kind of covering the community, kind of covering, the news and the latest happenings in the community as it continues to grow and expand, and new tests that are being done and the events, and covering your you specifically, you and your court case and all of that stuff. That's all just relevant to the conversation, to people that are paying attention to this and seeing this community grow and expand and the truth be exposed more and more. So that's really where nothing specific I would say that the show has been doing other than trying to be a kind of a mouthpiece for, groups like FE Corps, who are, the Field Engineer Corps, the Independent Research Foundation that is, doing laser tests and doing microwave tests and all of these things to show and use real science to demonstrate, what it is that we actually live on and be able to try and discover, how things work. The different laser tests and what have you have all been, talked about on the show, the different events, the conferences, you name it. We've covered it. And, it's just a great way for the community to come together, I think, on a regular basis. And I'm blessed that my show is right before Mark's. And so, it ends up being like 4 hours on Tuesdays, where, we see, the same group of people, are coming together regularly and enjoying fellowship and, being like-minded, and it helps a lot in this world because it is quite a different conversation than what the mainstream narrative is, and so it's good to fellowship together and reinforce and just really enjoy some time to be able to not have to watch what you say or be careful what you say, but you can speak the truth boldly and without any repercussion is something we all want to do on a regular basis, to navigate these lies and try and wake up the world.
Right. Yeah. And, there's very few communities out there that will allow you to speak openly, especially on this issue, that has been such a topic of contention for so long amongst so many and was so divisive that initially, some people in some broadcasts and some communities, they were hesitant to really get into it, and I'm glad that a lot of people have overcome that and are now even willing to listen, because again, it does not take much examination, just a little bit of open-mindedness to really throw a wrench in the whole Copernican model for understanding the world. I mean, the whole thing with there's no curvature and the dynamics of water, just those two things really distort and destroy the arguments against, and the arguments that we've all been indoctrinated and propagandized and taught all of our lives. The whole, kids sitting in a classroom around the globe, spinning it around, looking to see where they live, and all of that. And then you see on every movie just about there's universal, the globe. There's always the planet or the globe or that whole reinforcement of space and that ideology on all of these for whatever reason. So many of these entertainment companies have icons that are part of and that reinforce that whole belief system.
Yeah, it's, you wake up to some of these things, you see the world through quite a bit different lens. And, you start spotting some of these things, like you said, the corporate narratives, the logos just in of itself, and you start seeing, the occult nature of, the history of NASA and, just how everything kind of pieces together. Things just make sense, and when I talk to people, one of the first things that you do is you talk about your awakening, kind of like what you and I were doing here tonight. And, how'd you end up here? How'd you get here?
Right.
And inevitably, people are saying, the stories are very similar. They either tried to debunk it or they had they were conspiracy minded. They didn't trust the government anyway, and you come into these truths and things just kind of click. The puzzle pieces are put together in your mind and you're able to move forward from there, and you see everything differently. But, something common that I hear is that, life makes sense again. There's quite a contentment. The truth will set you free. There's so much truth to that statement, because I think anybody that's gone through this, gone down this path and realized the layers of deception, but able to break through their programming and through their indoctrination and wake up, if you will, that is something that I think we all share, is that life makes sense, and I look at everything differently. I look at fellow man differently. I look at animals differently. I look at creation differently. Everything just makes sense, and there's such a rest in the truth that I don't know why. I really don't understand why more people don't love the truth, don't care about the truth. And obviously, I can't relate because I'm not them, but that's just how I see things. It's just how I operate.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm exactly with you on that. I don't understand why more people don't have a consideration for or an interest in the truth. Like people say, even with this topic, well, what does it matter? What is it? Who cares if the earth is a ball or flat? Well, for me, truth matters, and the fact that we've been lied to and deceived about so much, and that once you understand that, you have to reconsider and second guess everything that you've been taught and re-examine everything with reconsideration. I mean, it matters to me. And so definitely, I'm with you on that with regard to truth. But again, with this topic, it's the hardest thing for people to overcome their indoctrination, just because they're like, well, why would they lie to us about all this? What would be the purpose and the reason, as far as creating the deception? And then if you understand that, NASA is getting $56 million a day. That's a little bit of incentive right there.
Yeah, you can, I think for somebody even that maybe isn't, grounded in the scriptures or biblical truths aren't, something that is part of their lives or that they, focus on, but you can come at them with these different angles, because there is so many, and that is mind control, obviously the financial side of things, advancing the narratives, whatever that is, there's a ton of reasons. And that's something that's very disturbing to me when somebody says, why does it matter? Because that just tells me a lot about just their character.
Yes.
That's something, if that's how they see things, then, that would be the worst kind of approach, I think, that you could take to the world and how it works. If it's just things don't matter. And I think that's the idea. That's the system is meant to get you so complacent, like you talked about earlier, so complacent about things that, there's the haves and the have-nots, and that's just the way it is. This is the hand I'm dealt. I'm an accident. We're living on a spinning ball flying through space, and it's all an accident. It's all by chance, and it could all end at any time. And what's life worth? And and it just leads into all these other deceptions and lies and works of Satan, and that's the whole idea. So when somebody just says, what does it matter? it's dangerous. It makes it extremely dangerous, I think, when it comes to an outlook about how the world works and the kind of the situation that we're in, that we've allowed to take place, with our complacency, with our, trust to authority and not being skeptical and, not using the scripture to prove all things like we should be.
Right. And then, for both you and I, we want to be good examples to our children in leading them to truth and having answer as well, and so that they can also be, the holders of the secrets, the wisdom keepers, and they can share that with others and lead them to truth. But we've got just about 15 minutes remaining, so I want to kind of switch gears. I want to ask you about what do you see as far as prophecy? And do you study prophecy? Is that an interest of yours as well? And kind of what do you see coming on the horizon?
Well, no, I'm not going to pretend to be definitely at the level that you and Rob and some other folks are when it comes to that. I haven't spent a lot of time or as much time kind of on the biblical angle. Robbie Davidson, Pastor Nate. There's so many people that I look up to and would kind of lean on when it comes to some of that understanding. So I tell you that just to say, most of my focus has been just more on the faking space, and the reason that really became important to me is because that was the first thing that I had to overcome. That was my perception when it comes to this topic. I had to, the first thing I thought of was pictures from space, and so I've spent a good chunk of my time in trying to produce content that's going to get people to look at the different space agencies and what they, their propaganda and that sort of thing, hoping that will, isn't a roadblocker for people because, I see that a lot, we got pictures from space. So and so I wanted to attack that head on because that was the first speed bump that I had to, that I came to. But beyond that, just, being grounded in the scriptures and, my thanks to my parents for, raising me, knowing the truth and believing that the word of God was true and inerrant, infallible, God breathed, Holy Spirit inspired, etc. That is, where the foundation is for me. Like I said, when I started looking into this entire topic, I came across obviously all of the evidence that from a natural law and a natural world, personally observational evidence and experience. That's what I looked at first. But once I realized that the basis for that is in Scripture and that the Scripture is supporting a geocentric, Earth, that's not a globe flying through space with a firmament. It's fixed. It's immovable. That was the exclamation point on this thing for me. So I enjoy obviously the fellowship with like-minded biblical cosmologists, and I'm talking literal biblical cosmologists, viewpoints was where I find myself. But when it comes to the prophecy side and looking ahead, it's just very evident to me. It just makes a lot of sense that the narratives that we have seen, and they've obviously evolved over time with people and technology and different, narratives that needed to be propagated to advance agendas, when it comes to political or religious, what have you. The important thing, I think, for the elite is keeping us distracted, keeping us fighting amongst ourselves, keeping us dumbed down, keeping us sick, keeping us as customers to the system, consumers of this earthly, fleshly realm that we find ourselves. And that's the whole idea. And I think the Bible speaks to that. And really, somebody studying the scripture is going to realize that is the trap. That is Satan's snare. And, breaking out of that and having a heavenly mindset is what is necessary, and breaking free as much as possible from, these ropes that seem to hold us down, that we're born into bondage, born into slavery, so to speak, within our minds, because we're attacked at such a young age, at a time of our lives when we cannot defend, these things ourselves. We don't have the ability to do that. And if our parents aren't on the same page, if our teachers and the people we look up to aren't there as well, well, then they're helping propagate this lie, propagate the deception. And so, how could they keep this thing a secret? Why wouldn't more people, whistle blow this thing and that sort of thing? And I look at people that say that and I say, because look at you, you're sitting here and you're propagating this lie and you don't even know it. You're part of the deception and you don't even know it. That's how powerful this thing is. Mm-hmm. That's how powerful it is.
Yeah, absolutely. You had mentioned that your mother went with you to take on the world. Can you talk about that experience? And is she open besides having a relationship with you? Does she know about these kind of things, or was that kind of her first experience of being, open to so many topics, because they do cover so much there at that conference?
Yeah, they do. It was a wonderful experience. It's the first time that I had been there. I had only heard about it a year earlier. In fact, Pastor Nate, I'm not sure if he's still in the chat, but, hearing his story that he attended there with his wife and then ended up getting fired because of his just for attending. He didn't speak. He didn't, they didn't even give him a chance to talk about, which sessions he went to. I mean, there's 3 different stages and, 30 or 40 different speakers and all of these different topics, like you said. So, that was quite a story. And his ministry now is something so special because of what he's experienced, being willing to, stick his neck out there. But that's when I first heard about Take on the World. So when it came around this year, I really wanted to go. And I think I bought a ticket, and then Chris Bailey reached out to me, the organizer, Chris and Liz Bailey, and said, "Hey, do you want to do a presentation?" And so, in fact, he asked me to do 2 presentations. So I did one on both days of the conference. And so, obviously, was very honored to be asked and was going to go. And I just thought it would be cool to bring my mom along because she's a truther.
Awesome.
She's always been somebody that cares about the truth, that loves the truth, and she's been a great role model in my life. I should have mentioned that earlier when I was talking about my story. She's been the most major influence, outside of obviously the Creator, on my search for truth. Because she's always been willing to stick her neck out there and say what she believes, and a diligent researcher when it comes to so many different subjects, and always willing to talk to family directly and red pill them, as she says, when it comes to all of these different
That's
things.
awesome.
So I knew it'd be a great experience. So we went and we got smacked by a couple of different presentations, and I left there, and I think she did too, with the spirit that was convicted that we can do more. And there was a lot of things about Scripture we thought we knew and understood that we didn't, and it was just a great inspirational sort of week for the both of us to really grow closer to God and meet some new people. And we came out of there doing some things, recommitting ourselves in some different areas. And it was just a very, very powerful time. So, she lives here in the same town with me. She just across the river. In fact, I got invited over there on Saturday night, and we'll be celebrating the Sabbath together. And it's going to be awesome. So I think she's listening. She said she was going to be listening tonight. I think she is. So shout out to Mom and my stepdad.
Yeah, shout out to Mom. Yeah. Awesome. Well, that's fantastic, brother, and it's an incredible thing to be able to share with your parents and also your children truth and to have it relatable, because I know for so many it causes division, and a lot of people just are not wanting to hear anything about it, and it causes conflict. And when people first wake up to truth and they want to share the discoveries that they've made, it's important to them. And so we want to talk about it, whether people want to listen or not sometimes. And for some relationships, it pushes people away. And especially if you are the kind of person that you're going to talk about it regardless whether they want to hear it or not, that really creates some division. And I know for myself, I had to learn to kind of tone it down after my awakening, and that even though I wanted everybody to know, certainly not everybody wanted to hear and a lot of them, well, most of them weren't even interested,
Well,
And
you get this, you have this awakening, and you're so excited about it, and even more, there's more things that line up with Scripture. It's such a powerful thing that happens in our lives, when something, is confirmed in the Bible or confirmed in our faith, and you just want to go shout it from the mountaintops, and you learn quickly that not everybody is at the same spot as you, and they're not gonna be able to emulate that joy because they're not you at that moment in time, and they don't have those convictions or whatever. And so, I had to definitely dial it back a little bit, and both at home and friends and family and extended family, what have you. So there's some that are completely aware and on board, and there's some that think I'm an absolute nut job, and that's just right now.
Yeah, and so a recommendation for others that are just now really learning about these kind of things, that I find it's better to honor people where they are, respect their opinions, and if they aren't really interested, then, don't try to force the seeds upon them.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, I make it known how I believe and why, and if they want to listen to the whys, I'm happy to explain my position and faith and what have you, but it's not something that I will continue to harp on. It basically leave them like, if you have questions, let me know. I'm happy to talk about it any time, but I don't continually bring it up. I might send them a little video here and there, or a little link here and there, just carefully timed. Yeah, just plant. Yeah, just drop in little seeds every once in a while. But I try my best to not let it affect the relationship. The relationship with my father is a perfect example. He still thinks we went to the moon.
Right.
And so he's not there whatsoever. And, we've had our talks, and he knows where I stand. But when he comes over here, or when I go over to his place, it's a handshake and a hug, and I love you, Dad. And
awesome.
It's the way it is, So, meet people at their level, and, just don't let it ruin friendships. Don't let it ruin relationships, and, pray for them, and, keep them in prayers is what we can do, and just be a good role model,
Right.
Obviously do not let our good be evil spoken of.
Right. And especially for family, I think it's important to remember, that we have special relationship, and that, some things, even these kind of topics, even if it's important, it's not, more important than family.
Yeah. I mean, the family, those are people you daily, or at least on a regular basis, that you have to face. So, you want to preserve that, and, hey, look at it as an opportunity to be a good witness, and to be a good role model for, you want them to see Jesus through you. So, that's what I try and do on a regular basis, depending on what level they're at or where they're at in their walk, that's between them and the Lord, between them and their family, what have you. So I can just control me, and I just focus on that. And I'm always here if there's questions or they want to talk or what have you. And, it's just, I think that's just the way to do it. That's what I would expect from other people if I was in their shoes, and that's, how I would try and walk myself.
Yes. And I think it's important to recognize that we're not promised any more tomorrows, and that any day could really be the last time that you have chance to share your love with your family members, your siblings, your children, and that we really should embrace and live like that, today could be the last. So certainly do what you can to let your family, your parents, and your children know that you love them, and no regrets moving forward.
Right on. Yeah, that's the important thing is, show them love. The joy in your heart, the joy of your salvation. Those are things that I want them to see. I think that we would all want our family and friends to see at the end of the day, so that they wouldn't question, our love for them or Lord. And so those are the important things, is globe earth versus flat earth. Is that a salvation issue? I don't believe it is.
Right.
I believe there's something much more important than that. But at the end of the day, that's what's most important. Like you said, the sun may not come up tomorrow. And where are you leaving things? Where are you at with the Lord, and where are you at with your family are the things that you'll probably live with forever.
Amen. Amen. And, I think that Christ exampled that to us as well, to love even our enemies, and so we're to love God, love each other, and love our enemies, and treat others as we would want to be treated. And really, he said that was the whole of the law. And, how beautiful is that? And if the whole world could just follow those commandments, what an incredible place this would be,
That's right. Yep, you can boil the Ten Commandments down to those two things. Love the Lord thy God with all your heart, soul, and mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. And that's what we should be focusing on.
Yep. All right, brother, we got 1 minute remaining, so final comment. I love what you just said, but last message to the audience.
Oh, appreciate that. Well, thanks for having me on, Zen. It was a great time. Appreciate the conversation, and right back at you. I appreciate your work and all that you've done, and you've been an inspiration to me. I've read a few of your books, and great stuff. So, if people want to get a hold of me, just shoot me an email, paul@paulandtheplane.com. Check out my show over on TFR or my podcast, domelifepodcast.com, and love to hear from you. And I just appreciate everybody's time. And if there's anybody listening, I'll be at the Dallas conference in November, the 14th and 15th. So check it out at fe2019.com. Zen will be there too. So we'll hook up soon, sir. It'll be awesome.
Yeah, looking forward to it, brother, and appreciate your willingness, and thank you, everybody, for joining us this evening. Remember, I'll be on with Rob midnight to 2 a.m. on Truth Frequency Radio. God bless all. Good night.